The Southwest Division is young and interesting. There's a ton of potential to make some serious noise in the postseason, except for one team in the San Antonio Spurs, but they've had it too good for too long, so it's about time that they suck.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
The Houston Rockets have been drafting fairly well post James Harden and are tied to the growth of Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., and the most recently drafted Jabari Smith Jr. The Dallas Mavericks have a potential all-time great in Luka Doncic. The Grizzlies have always drafted well and continue to remain hyper-competitive and could be a serious problem this year as a title threat. And we have the New Orleans Pelicans, who surprised everyone last year and look to build on that growth. As usual, we will start from the team that I think will be the best and work our way down. Welcome to AJM in the AM. I'm Anthony Mero with episode 28. Now, picking a number one team here is tough. We had one team that made the conference finals, one that looked all sorts of phenomenal but lost in the first round, and one that gave the eventual champion Warriors all they could handle while playing the last 3 games without their best player. But I have to give the 1 seed here to the New Orleans Pelicans. Maybe I'm overestimating them, but they got a lot better over the course of last season, and they have the roster makings of a potential deep playoff run. Brandon Ingram has consistently been lauded as a great player, and I've always enjoyed his game. I was screaming when the Lakers decided to trade him over Kyle Kuzma for Anthony Davis, but he blossomed in New Orleans, which only improved in the playoffs. His regular season 23-5-5 became an efficient 27-6-6 against the best team in the NBA record-wise. But this team is so much more than Ingram and friends. They played all of last season without their potential best player in Zion Williamson. Now, if you said Ingram is their best player, I wouldn't argue, but Williamson is one of the most dominant forces in today's game. In Zion's lone healthy season, he put up 27 points and 7 boards while being one of the most efficient paint scorers in the game. Now, Zion still has some serious injury concerns. He barely played his rookie season, and he missed all of last year with a foot injury, which is a major red flag considering his massive size. But we have been optimistic here for every other team before this. I'm not bucking that trend now. The Pels added CJ from my Blazers, which gave them a trio of dynamite but efficient scorers with Zion, CJ, and Ingram, with the latter two being legit 3-level scorers who can torch the mid-range game. But what's important to these Pelicans goes well beyond their big 3. They have a good coach in Willie Green that has gotten pure buy-in from the roster. Even Zion, who didn't play last year, where there were a ton of rumors about him potentially asking out, bought into what Green has been selling. They have some seriously good role players. Herb Jones as a rookie became a phenomenal 3-and-D guy. Larry Nance Jr. is a solid stretch big. Jonas Valanciunas gives them different options as a great post player, rebounder, and stretch 5 who also sets brick wall screens. Trey Murphy, another solid 3-and-D guy, and one of everyone's new favorite players, Jose Alvarado. I've been watching the entirety of Chris Paul's career, and I've never seen anyone get under his skin like Jose Alvarado did the entire 6-game series. Now, I do know and understand that the Pelicans were only 36-46 last year. That's a bad record by almost every metric. By old rules, they wouldn't have even been in the playoffs, but they got in through the play-in game, stealing that spot from the Clippers. They seem to be building something special here, and the players are sold on what GM David Griffin and head coach Willie Green are selling, and that buy-in cannot be overstated. I see the Pelicans ceiling of about 55-27, a floor with their injury history being 43-39, but I have them going 53-29. Next up, we have the Grizzlies, and I wouldn't be mad at you if you wanted the Grizzlies to be first. The Grizz were amazing last year. Low-key, they've never really been bad for a prolonged stretch. Their drafting and roster additions have always kept them competitive. Unlike the Sacramento Kings, who have missed the playoffs for 16 straight seasons, I think the Grizz, since they first made it, have only had a 4-year drought before being back in the postseason. They do have a good front office. They have a bona fide superstar in John Morant. The kid is phenomenally talented with a screw-you attitude. Ja is an athletic, undersized guard that always ups his game in big moments, but his style of play freaks me out. Every time he jumps, I gasp in both excitement for what I can see and worry for what I don't want to see. And it's freakier that this sentiment is echoed by basically everyone. He already has an injury history with his knees, nagging problems that caused him to miss time this last postseason, especially during a crucial stretch. But head coach Taylor Jenkins has a great system for the roster here. They have a great roster surrounding Ja. Guys like Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, the NBA's strongest man in Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark, and the most underappreciated point guard in the history of the NBA, Tyus Jones. I love Tyus Jones. I loved him in Minnesota. I love the fact that he got paid $15 million a season to be a backup point guard. He has the highest assist to turnover ratio, and it's not even close. Tyus just makes good decisions with the basketball. The Grizzlies overall, though, are a great team. In my opinion, I know the Warriors and Curry stands might be a little tight about this, but if Ja doesn't go down to injury, I think the Grizz win that series. In Game 4, the Grizzlies led the entire game, 47 minutes and 14 seconds before blowing their double-digit lead to lose, and Ja is their closer who dominates the final minutes of every game. His clutch stats are insane. His per 36 in that postseason for clutch minutes had him averaging 54 points, 12.9 boards, and 6.4 assists. The dude is cold-blooded, and that's what the Grizzlies were missing before they had a 39-point win in Game 5 to force that Game 6. The series very easily could have been 3-2 Grizzlies since they lost that Game 6 with a bad fourth quarter. But I'm sidetracked, sorry, don't worry about it, I'm a little salty as well. But yes, the Grizzlies are great. I'm very high on them. They could easily be the best team out west next season. But those injury concerns worry me. Ja is very talented, but he has missed a lot of time with knee soreness, tweaks, and swelling. The team is still built to sustain it, but Dillon Brooks also has an injury history. He missed a lot of time last season. I see a ceiling of this team being a Phoenix-esque 64-18, with the floor being 50-32, but this is a smart team. They understand that rest should be prioritized, and it's very important for them. So I'm going to be on the conservative side of things, tying with the Pelicans, 53-29. Now, if you like this content, please hit the subscribe button to join the Ant Colony. It's crazy that we're already at 136. I'm looking to get to 150 as the next milestone. Help me get there, and like this video as well to push us up that YouTube algorithm. Now we have the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavs had a lot of turnover for a team that was 52-30 last year. The biggest moves being losing Jalen Brunson to the Knicks and trading for Christian Wood. And I think Wood is a really interesting addition. He's a solid stretch big that's also a great athlete. As a screen partner with Luka can be very special. Obviously, Luka Doncic is a fantastic player. Despite his defensive limitations and despite him not being a super athlete, Luka has solidified himself as a top 5 player in today's game. He's been an All-NBA first-team member for 3 consecutive seasons for a reason. His offensive brilliance is unmatched, and his ability to up his play in the playoffs is crazy. His first 2 postseasons were losses to the Clippers, and Luka was still dominating despite being defended by either Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. So, just 2 of the best perimeter defenders in the league? Jason Kidd as a coach doesn't nearly get enough credit for how he develops players. He was big in the ascension of Giannis Antetokounmpo as a do-it-all player, but if you look at this new Mavs team, it doesn't feel like they got much better. If anything, they may have gotten a little bit worse. They still have some talent here. Spencer Dinwiddie is one of my favorite players to watch. He's just a smart baller, makes good plays, goes hard on defense, and then a very good shooter with limited touches. They will be getting back Tim Hardaway Jr. for some added shot creation off the bench. Dorian Finney-Smith has become a very solid rotation 3-and-D guy. Maxi Kleber just signed an extension, very team-friendly for his stretch play, but he was exploited on defense a lot against the Warriors. They also added JaVale McGee to bring in a good defensive-minded big and adds different looks to their lineups. I personally love McGee. He's a guy that just accepts his role, plays hard every single minute he's on the court, and a really good locker room presence. However, losing Brunson definitely hurts. That was their injury insurance. I expect the Mavs to still be in the trade market through the course of the season. Maybe with the Jazz for Jordan Clarkson or Mike Conley, having that backup guard to create and potentially take some of that workload from Luka will be good for their season. This team, however, moves as Luka moves. Think 2005 to 2010 Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron. The roster here is better than that one was, but it's still limited and is firmly reliant on Luka being the perennial MVP candidate he has been. I think the Mavs take a small step back, their ceiling being 55 and 27 if all goes right, their floor being 47 and 35 if they really miss Brunson, they make no moves, and Hardaway gets hurt again, but I'll settle them in at 50 and 32. We are starting to reach the bottom of the barrel here. We have the Houston Rockets. Through no fault of their own, they are in full rebuild mode. Thank you, James Harden. They have drafted and are developing said draftees fairly well. Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. are a solid tandem at the guard position. Both of them play with a chip on their shoulder. They are slowly getting better and better and have the ability to go nuclear at any moment. The addition of Jabari Smith, however, helps add some size while filling one of their biggest needs at the forward position. This team is still very far away from competing at a meaningful level, but there's something brewing here. If they can continue to grow and if Jabari becomes the star he was touted as in college, his shooting, size, and athleticism should translate fairly well into the NBA. He may be their future with Green and Porter as his supplementary stars. And maybe Alperen Sengun takes another step forward. He showed some flashes last year and he just turned 20 years old in July. Steven Silas hasn't produced much for this team, but there's faith he can be a good coach. Young teams aren't meant to win a lot. They're just meant to get better over time, which over the course of the season they did. There's not much here for Houston to have a successful year. It should be just tied to the growth of their trio of young studs. Like any young team, regardless of how nuclear their players can be, especially in today's NBA, consistency can be a problem, and the inconsistency of this young squad is going to be one of their many limiters. I see a ceiling of 23 and 59, a floor of 20 and 62, but I have them going 21 and 61. Not much better than last year. I think losing Woods hurts their winning potential, but winning is not their goal for this year. Finally, the San Antonio Spurs are bad. It's sad to see since I love Greg Popovich. He's the greatest coach of all time in my eyes. They overachieved last year with a limited roster for a record of 34 and 48. They moved on from Derek White mid-season. They traded their best player and lone all-star DeJounte Murray to Atlanta. Lonnie Walker is now a Laker. That's 3 of their top 6 scorers from last season. They're feeling the effects of losing that Kawhi Leonard trade. With how draft picks are being sent away now, can you imagine what they would have got for Kawhi? And their roster is absolutely worse because of it. The Spurs are now in full rebuild mode. No longer will they try to be competitive. At least they shouldn't. They simply can't keep up with the Western Conference's best teams. So losing right now should be their only beneficial route. Keldon Johnson last year was a solid player. Now, potentially, he's going to be their best player. As a number 1, will he be able to shine as much? I expect the Spurs to try and trade some of their aging rotation pieces for younger players and draft capital. You know, people like Podol or Josh Richardson. They no longer fit their timetable since being competitive shouldn't be their aim anymore. The Spurs have just been great at developing players, pretty low-key. They've done it throughout their history, so I don't expect them to be bad for long. This year, however, they will be terrible. They didn't get a top 5 pick because they were still competitive last year, so drafting Jeremy Sochan may not be the brightest prospect. But we know how the Spurs are. The Spurs are going to spur, so he may end up being an all-time great. With a ceiling of 20 and 62 and a floor of 15 and 67, I expect them with Pop at the helm to still win some games and hit that 20 and 62 ceiling. This division is fun. I love what the Mavs, Grizzlies, and Pelicans are doing and what they can be, which is part of the Western Conference elite. They can be there. I can't wait to see how much noise these squads make next season, especially in the playoffs. But as always, thank you for watching. I appreciate it every single time, and I'll see you next week.